in February's past when we've had balmy Vancouver weather. So maybe there will be some guys making the trip. Where there's a different port. I can't remember where they go, but they go somewhere, and that's all the Friday the 13th. So I hope no black cats cross your path today, and I hope you're ready for tomorrow. Go get your chocolate or whatever else you get for Valentine's. It's chocolate. It's a chocolate thing, right? And again, I've been watching the price of cocoa very closely, and the price of cocoa is going down, but the price of chocolate well, you know what? It's actually a little bit more reasonable than it was at Christmas. It's not nearly as expensive. So that's interesting to pay attention to. And so there you go. Trump is going to dismantle the climate change hoax. Well, Canada completely ignores all of that and pretends that climate change is really, really bad enough to buy Chinese EVs at scale. So weird, right? Weird for us to do that. But here we are. Another way to rig elections is to just cancel the elections. And so England is doing that. There are a whole bunch of other ways, to rig elections, and we're going to examine them because, well, that's what we do here. Canada isn't having babies because everything is too expensive. Dr. Lewis is looking at the birth rate in Canada and ringing the alarm bells. But the reason people aren't having babies is simply because everything costs too damn much. And if you can't buy a house, then people are kind of in arrested development. You can't move to the next phase in your life because you are physically trapped in the apartment phase, let's say. And not to say you can't have babies in apartments. That's not true. But some people can't even do the apartment thing, right? Some people can't get their own apartment. So it's an interesting situation. And I think that it is done on purpose. And I think they damn well know the response of humans in a situation where everything's too expensive. They stop having babies. And well, they like that just fine. They want to replace the entire population of Canada using immigration, and they're quite open about that. They want to, in fact, increase the population of Canada to 100 million people by 2100, and again, very open about that. And you can't do that when you're not having babies unless you're importing people. And the reason they want to import people is because they are tax-paying citizens pretty much right away. Canada doesn't have to invest anything to raise them up to 18 years old. Boom, tax-paying citizens right here. Whole families of them. So they import them. And I think it's a Ponzi scheme. I think that's part of the reason that our governments are doing this. AI is being used to decide about loans, but it has a massive bias that's deeply embedded and very difficult to get out. Heckling the CPC MP who's refusing the pay raise, that's the response of his caucus. So very, very interesting times we live in Canada. To start, we have to start with Trump and what he's doing with climate change. And I'm going to contrast that with the European Union and Canada, because what we're doing is doubling down. And I think that that's a really bad idea because it hamstrings us financially, economically. We are our worst enemy. We are taxing the inputs to make our products. That makes our products more expensive for nothing. It's like running a marathon and you decide, before I run this marathon, I'm going to drive a nail through my foot. Why? Great question. Why would you do that? You shouldn't do that. That's a bad idea. Same thing with carbon taxes and pretending that taxing carbon, taxing the inputs, making everything more expensive is going to somehow change the weather. It's insanity. So Trump is dismantling it. But there are a lot of people who are really, really, they love the climate change narrative. They believe the climate change narrative. And it is, so when Trump moves to expose this hoax, he has pushback from people who are people who just believe the narrative they've been told, and they think Trump is a bad guy because he's removing these protections so that he can remove the climate change hoax and remove its ability to tax people and so on and so forth. They say, oh no, Trump's undermining our climate change response. But I don't think that that's the case. But it's a very interesting situation, I think, because from my view, what Trump is doing is a good thing. But there are people out there, and they're all the CBC people who are writing for CBC and all the rest. They're saying, oh no, this is very, very bad. Trump is going to, negatively impact the world because of what he's doing here. And again, I don't think that's true. I think that the things that Trump is going to negatively impact are the people that he's fighting against, and indeed the people who are fighting against the West. But the people who are fighting against the West are aligning themselves or trying to convince everybody else to align with them to hate Trump. And they'll use any reason at all, Epstein, climate change, any reason to get people on the same page as them in hating Trump. And I think that it's sensationalized. There are situations like I was making the comparison yesterday to the Kavanaugh stuff, all the Epstein stuff. I think it's sensationalized and it looks like a coordinated attack. And then the climate change stuff, I think we're going to see that ramp up after Trump saying what he said yesterday. Anyway, lots to get to. Let's get to it. So Unusual Whales is saying the Trump administration has repealed the finding that greenhouse gases threaten human life and well-being, meaning that the EPA can no longer regulate them. So that's framed like Trump's doing this so he can maneuver more easily, not this whole thing's been a scam the whole time anyway, and we've wasted a crap ton of money. So there's multiple Trump things talking about what he's repealing, and so I'll let him introduce it. Here we go.
In 2009, Barack Hussein Obama, his EPA designated fossil fuels such as oil, gas, and other things that actually make factories rock and roll and other things drive very nicely as a threat to health and human welfare, known as the endangerment finding. This determination had no basis, in fact, had none whatsoever, and it had no basis in law. On the contrary, over the generations, fossil fuels have saved millions of lives and lifted billions of people out of poverty and all over the world. And you see it with the blackouts all over where they don't use it, where they went to wind, intermittent wind, which is weak and ineffective and very, very costly, most costly energy there is. And people are dying because there was no air conditioning or there was no heating. Lots of other things, bad things happened. And yet
he's referring there the no heating to Texas, and his there was something he signed just recently, not very long ago, just before there was a cold snap in Texas, and it's, as far as I understand it, being credited with making sure that grid didn't go down during that snow. The grid was up and down, like it went down, but it came back up quickly, from what I hear. And Trump is credited for opening up the coal before that, as far as I understand it. So I think that's interesting. I don't know what he's talking about specifically with regard to the air conditioning, but I know Texas had a cold snap and there was a response before the cold snap. It was done maybe because of the cold snap, but I'm not 100% sure on the details. So apologize about that. But that's interesting. Back to
this radical rule became the legal foundation for the Green New Scam, one of the greatest scams in history, probably as great, maybe even greater than Russia hoax, etc., which the Obama and Biden administration used to destroy countless jobs.
Pivot.
The jobs have been just decimated. Although they're all coming back because of tariffs, they're all coming back into our country.
That's another pivot.
At levels we've never seen before. But it raised prices and caused immense harm to the U.S. auto industry. We thought irreparable, but we've got them back. We're coming back now.
So there you go. Trump's talking about the impact of these bad laws on the auto industry and, getting factories rocking and rolling. Here's another thing. Nick Soder says President Trump has officially terminated the Obama regulations, which forced stop-start features in cars. I always thought that was a bad idea. Like, it didn't seem like a good idea. So you're going to turn the car off at a stoplight and then turn it back on? Doesn't it take a lot of gas to turn the car on again? Here we go.
But I'm pleased to be joined today by EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, who you all know, and to announce the single largest deregulatory action in American history. That's a big statement, in American history. And I think we can add the words by far. Under the process just completed by the EPA, we are officially terminating the so-called endangerment finding, a disastrous Obama-era policy that severely damaged the American auto industry and massively drove up prices for American consumers. Prices went up incredibly for a worse product. This action will eliminate over $1.3 trillion of regulatory costs and help bring car prices tumbling down dramatically. You're going to get a better car. You're going to get a car that starts easier, a car that works better for a lot less money.
There you go. Who would disagree with that? That's a good deal, right? New York Post is reporting White House says it will save Americans $2,400 on car purchases. This is why. Read today's cover here. Sorry, I got something in my mouth. So man on emission. Ha, right? That's pretty funny. CTV News is reporting Canada is not on track to hit our net zero commitments by 2050 or meet any climate targets, says a study. I'm shocked. No, I'm totally shocked. I can't even believe it. So they're trying, this is hectoring Canadians. They're not reporting about the bad policies that are driving to unaffordable groceries. They're not reporting about milk going up from $6.25 to $6.50 now, which is unbelievable. They're not reporting on anything whatsoever. Carney's connections to shady characters, the fact that the whole makeup of the government is exactly the same as it was just before the election, and that doesn't make any sense. And the fact that pollsters are polling people and they're looking at Carney in a majority territory when the reality is he promised to get a deal with Trump and instead he delivered a deal with China, and you don't get a majority for doing shit like that. Excuse my French, right? Like, nah, I don't think so. So they're reporting on none of that stuff, and they're reporting on this nonsense. Oh no, pearl clutch. What about the children? We're not going to meet any climate targets. Well, the climate targets are bunk, and they're unmeetable anyway. Like, it's ridiculous and it's stupid, and all it does is increase the cost or the price of all of the things that we have to buy, unfortunately. Disclosed TV is reporting Ursula von der Leyen says the EU's carbon market ETS has generated 260 billion euros. If you want to pollute, you pay. If you don't want to pay, you innovate. There isn't anything else. You can't just decide to not use power, electricity, and like you can choose, I guess, to build in Quebec and you could have hydroelectric power or something like that, and choose to have power that's generated that way, and that might kind of do it sometimes, but realistically, there isn't an option for your everyday. If you want to open a restaurant, it's not like you can say I'm an off-grid restaurant. We don't have power or running water. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. So they say innovate. They have all the levers of control with regards to what is innovation, what counts as innovation, so on and so forth. You can't innovate and just like break into a market that easy. And especially a market they don't want you to break into. Look at what happened to all those people who released cars that run on water. H2O has hydrogen in it. There's a lot of energy in water. Why couldn't we harness that? And people have, and then they end up dead or something, right? Or buried under a whole bunch of social media misinformation. There's a YouTube guy who's building something like this in his garage, and he's doing the Bedini motors with the magnets, and that I was talking about years ago now. But he's actually building it, open sourcing it, and he's building boards to do the flip flop. And so it's really I think it's called limitless energy, limitless power. I'll put a link in the description. I'll put a link in the description. But He's building it, and you can get a board and you can put some batteries together, and like you could build it yourself too. I'm not so technical. I'm playing with the idea of doing it. I want to do it. Anyway, it is we are not being told the truth, and they're using that to control us. Let's talk about the shooter, and we're going to roll that right into free speech. And Cat Canada says CTV, well, she's responding to CTV, and CTV News is hectoring people about misinformation about the BC shooter. And CTV News says misinformation about trans people flood social media in the wake of BC mass shooting. And so people are having a conversation, and the powers that be have zero control of the conversation. So they're trying to get control back by saying, no, what they're saying is false. What they're saying is a lie. No, it's not. And we're not. And you can't transition your sex, period. You can't do that. It's not possible. Our system doesn't work that way. If you cut off your penis, then you're a eunuch, not a woman. Okay? Varus was a man. I'll say it as many times as I need to say it. Cactus are losing control of the narrative. Keep up the good work, all you transphobic right-wing extremists. But again, these are labels that are attached to people in order to invalidate their opinion. The fact that people can't change their gender or their sex is a plain fact. It's not right-wing or left-wing. It's not extreme, and it's not anything phobic. It is merely a fact. It is a simple if you could transition males into females at your will, then people would do that for pets. People would do that. Oh, I wanted a female cat, but there's only a male left. Let's transition him over, and no problem. It'll be a female cat. You can't do that. It doesn't work. That's fake. It's false. And everybody damn well knows it. And the only reason there's any question is because of media hype and lies. And they should be ashamed of themselves. Holly Doan says federal departments and agencies must boycott X, says Liberal appointed Alberta Senator. Those are Liberal appointed Alberta Senator. That's like a contradiction, right? Like that. Nope. They're not. I mean, they may be a senator in Alberta, but they're not an Alberta senator. You know what I mean? Here the quote is, when will the Canadian government follow New Brunswick's lead? So they're trying to invalidate X as a place where serious people don't don't hang out. If the government's there, then serious people are there. But if the government's not there, then serious people aren't there. So we'll have to go to LinkedIn to follow the government? Yawn, right? Like, I don't know about that one. Holly Doan says, Canada, and if I'm on LinkedIn, am I not able to call out these people who work for the tax-paying citizens on LinkedIn? Yeah, I'm sure they won't allow that, but it's one of those things where I don't know how you can possibly justify it. These people are supposed to work for us. They don't work for themselves. They don't work for a conglomerate that's foreign to Canada. They don't work for anybody but us. And they should damn well listen to the people who don't like them, because if they don't, they risk invalidating their legitimacy. And I mean, this government is illegitimate anyway. So Holly Doan says Canadians should beware of illegitimate media for the sake of social cohesion, says Canadian Heritage Minister Mark Miller. So here is the exchange where this takes place. And Rachel Thomas is pointing out correctly that this term social cohesion is used by communist China. What do you mean by that? And there isn't a clear answer here other than falling all over himself to justify what he said. Here we go.
Thank you, Minister. My first question for you is, you recently made a statement after becoming minister that part of the responsibility of CBC is to foster what you called, quote, social cohesion. Can you explain for the committee what you meant by social cohesion? The reason I ask is because experienced journalists have stated that these words, this term, is often used by the People's Republic of China to mean state control and zero tolerance for challenges. That seems counter to the values that we hold here in Canada, and so I'm curious as to what you meant by social cohesion.
I think in an age that we're all living through of intense disinformation, there is less social cohesion as falsities are propagated through media sources.
Falsities? That's a new one for me. The social cohesion doesn't have to do with lies on the internet. People can lie on the internet. They've been lying on the internet since the 90s. I promise you, right? Since the internet got started, they've been lying on it. The fish was this big. I promise you. Can't even see my hands. It's so big. People lie. It's not lies on social media. It's not lies on the internet. Ooh, that evil internet lying again, right? It's not. It is the fact that we have incompatible cultures being imported into the country by NGOs, foreign incompatible cultures that don't want to integrate with our society. They come here and they want to replace our society, and they're being told that they should and they can't. And that's the problem with the social cohesion. It has nothing to do with lies being told on the internet. People can tell lies, right? All day, every day, since the dawn of time, people tell lies, okay? And that doesn't have to do, not that it doesn't have to do with social cohesion. When the government lies to people, that's going to break up social cohesion. But usually the people demand a balance, right? They demand to fix it somehow if they realize they've been lied to, or they prefer to believe that they've not been lied to and that I'm just crazy. So these guys are lying liars, though. Anyway, carrying on with Mark Miller.
Is both legitimate and illegitimate. Integral to
what's illegitimate media? Am I illegitimate media? I think there's like a bunch of YouTube shows that do basically this shtick, right? Like, not as well as me, but there's a bunch of people who are doing basically this, right? And so illegitimate media, I think the illegitimate media is the media that takes government paychecks and softens their message in order to appeal to their biggest customer, the government, right? They say exactly what they're told to say. That's the illegitimate media, if there's any illegitimate media.
A healthy democracy, indeed the fourth pillar of our democracy, is a healthy media ecosystem that exercises rightly its freedom of expression. Again, integral to that is a state-financed public media that is the CBC or Radio-Canada, not state-controlled. Indeed, the CBC's mandate is one that is ferociously independent, and we should all defend that, whether they're saying good or bad things about us.
It's not independent. They're paid off, and the government, I think, has direct communication. They might even have dashboards where they say yes, no, no, yes. They might have final publishing control, right? Final edit control. Rachel Thomas is again responding to Mark Miller. Mark Miller is talking about how the journalists are independent. He talks about the littlest hobo, Mark Miller says conservatives think the littlest hobo is a journalist, and they're mad he has the prime minister's back. It's ridiculous. Here's the exchange again.
What was said at the event, Miss Thomas, from producers of shows like Heated Rivalry that was discussed at length, was that in the trade negotiations, these people that are defending Canadian content had the Prime Minister's back. It wasn't CBC or independent journalists. These speakers were head of an organization that talk about media producers.
And they are telling the Prime Minister, we have your back just as you have ours.
They are telling the Prime Minister, in the context of being under threat from U.S. content coming into Canada, that they want to protect a pillar of our cultural identity, which is Canadian content. That's all they were saying.
They tell stories.
I think you're wrong, and I
Their
think you
job
know
is to
it.
tell stories. So how are they going to tell stories to protect the Prime Minister's back?
They want support financially to be able to tell stories about Canadian identity. You're looking for something where there is not
quote from
an
the
issue.
individual who spoke.
But you're insinuating that it's journalists that are going to spin stories positively for the Prime Minister because they quote unquote have his back. That's entirely false.
No, that's exactly what they said. Like, that's exactly what they said. He didn't talk about the littlest hobo, so I don't know what's going on there. Let's talk about AI, and then I've got to say goodbye to the stream. AI is biased in a way that is programmed into it, in a way that is very deeply programmed into it. It is not a situation where the only reality that exists is what we tell the AI exists, through either giving it access to something or telling it directly this is how this exists. And it can't experience like the world without a medium, I think, right? Like you can't toss the AI into a robot and just let it go in the world, right? Like that's not happening. So it has to go through layers, and then it's being told how to interpret things in ways that are very, very deep. So Newswire says ChatGPT ranks red states as America's laziest, sparking outrage. The red states are the laziest? Huh. Isn't that weird? That's super weird. So there's a bias there. D.I. Sitivus says, warning, they're building in hidden biases into AI agents. They're embedded so deep that there's no easy way to tell. Researchers found that the AI, when evaluating two identical loan applications, would consistently reject the Christian and approve the Hindu. They are baking mass migration and DEI into the tools that banks, institutions, and governments are beginning to use more and more to automate interactions with customers and citizens. We need to find these biases and sue the perpetrators. Ivan says, you change one word on a loan application, the religion, the LLM rejects it. Change it back, approved. The model never mentions religion. It just frames the same debt ratio. Now, what does it say? Frames the same debt ratio differently to justify opposite decisions. We built a pipeline to find these hidden biases. So he's got a 13 thing thread that goes through it. I'll just read a couple of them. We call these unverbalized biases, decision factors that systemically influence outputs but are never cited as such. COT is supposed to let us monitor LLMs. If models act on factors they don't disclose, COT monitoring alone is insufficient. Our pipeline is fully automated and black box. 1, hypothesize candidates' biases via LLM. 2, generate controlled input variations. 3, test statistically. 4, filter concepts the model mentions in its reasoning. No predefined categories, no manual data sets. We tested 6 frontier models across 3 decision tasks. The pipeline automatically rediscovers biases that prior work found manually, validating our approach. Gender bias favoring female candidates, 5 of 6 models, race ethnicity bias favoring minority-associated names, 4 of the 6 models. We also find biases no prior manual analysis has covered: Spanish language ability, English proficiency, Gemma loans. I don't know what that means. Writing formality and religion affiliation. Okay. So Claude had bias for religious affiliation. Gemma and loans had writing formality bias. English proficiency had a bias in Gemma and loans, and Spanish language ability had a bias in these ones. So that's interesting. Important, we use bias descriptively, meaning a systemic decision shift. Religious affiliation in loan decisions, clearly inappropriate. English proficiency, more ambiguous. Whether a dedicated factor is normatively problematic depends on context and requires audit. 2 biases appear consistently across all 3 tasks: gender bias favoring female candidates and applications, race ethnicity bias favoring minority-associated applicants. Cross-task consistency suggests genuine model tendencies, no task-specific artifacts. Validation, we inject biases into a model in two models: secret, hidden from CTO, and overt, stated in reasoning. 92.5% accuracy, 85% of secret biases is detected, 100% of overt bias correctly filtered due to verbalization. So interesting. So they're saying they have a solution too. So I'm just pointing out that there's a huge bias in AI. And this is in the speech area. So they're going to silence us and say the AI says, and you can't question the AI. And we'll be trained like elephants are trained with heavy chains, that you just don't even question it. You just do what you're told, right? Wall Street Mav says, so if AI is going to disrupt lots of white collar jobs, does that mean all of the office buildings in the downtown core of cities will become mostly empty, and all of the restaurants and bars that cater to downtown office workers will be affected or are affected, and all the valuations of those buildings will drop, so all of the debt payments will go into default? Ooh. Office real estate, he's responding to this headline, office real estate stocks tumble as AI disrupt casualties in the stock market grow by the day. As AI disruption casualties in the stock market grow by the day. So I think that it's not necessarily AI that are emptying those office buildings. It's the work from home movement and the demand for people to work from home and the government allowing that. And those restaurants have already been winding down since 2020. Right? Matt Taibbi is talking about speech, but this is the impact of AI, but it's biased. So man, we don't know what we're losing, but we are losing something. Things are, you can feel it. It's different. Brits spied on Racket and other journalists, along with British journalist Paul Holden, Gabrielle P., Harry Y., Henry Dyer, and others. I was investigated by a firm called APCO, at the behest of Labour Together and current Cabinet Minister John Simmons. The material was then turned over to the GCSE. Oh, I've got to say goodbye to the stream. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want the whole show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. If not, that's okay. I'll be around tomorrow.